was Hillel maybe said that you can get it all on one leg.
That's right, standing on one foot.
Yeah.
So this is where we are getting to that famous section.
Yeah, draws attention to the implied reduction of written as well as oral Torah to interpretation, and the notion he believes to be peculiar to the Bavli, Talmud Bavli, and to the emphasis on the equivalence and independence of both stories.
Both stories.
What is it?
Oral and written.
Oral and written. All three stories exhibit a markedly positive attitude toward converts.
Yeah, I think in general that was the bent of the rabbis. I mean, in terms of how they, would teach. So, at any rate, here we go with our famous story. The rabbis taught, you should always be patient like Hillel, not impetuous like Shammai. Two men laid a bet, one with one another. They said, whoever gets Hillel into a rage will win 400 zuzi. One said, I will provoke him. That day was the eve of the Sabbath, and Hillel was washing his hair. The man passed the door of Hillel's house shouting, is Hillel there? Is Hillel there? Hillel robed himself, came out to greet him, and said, my son, what is it that you want? He replied, I have a question to put to you. Then ask, my son, ask. Why do Babylonians have round heads? Hillel replied, my son, you've asked an important question. It's because they lack skillful midwives. The man went off, waited an hour, and then came back. Now remember, this is again Erev Shabbat. Is Hillel there? Is Hillel there? Hillel robed himself, came out to greet him, and said, my son, what is it you want? He replied, I have a question to put to you. Then ask, my son, ask. Why do Pomeranians have tender eyes? And the Pomeranians were a splinter group from the Roman Empire in the mid-200s.
I'm going to get some water.
You read
So,
about Palmer's last time.
We probably did. There was some piece about them.
Yeah.
So Hillel replied, my son, you've asked an important question. It's because they live in a sandy place. The man went off, waited an hour, came back again, shouted. Okay, so each time he's shouting, each time he's got a question. So here he goes, he's on to his third question. Now remember, Hillel is likely, he was washing his hair, and now he's, I'm sure, getting ready for Shabbat. So, is Hillel there? Is Hillel there? Hillel robed himself, came out to greet him, and said, my son, what is it that you want? He replied, I have a question to put to you. Then, my son, ask. Why do Africans have broad feet? Hillel replied, my son, you've asked an important question. It's because they live among pools of water. I have a lot of questions to ask, but I'm afraid you will get angry. Hillel robed himself, sat before him, and said, ask all the questions you want. The man said, are you Hillel, whom they call the Prince of Israel? I am. Then may there not be many like you in Israel. Why do you say that, my son? Because through you I have lost 400 zuzi. Hillel replied, restrain your emotions. Better you should lose 400 zuz and 400 zuz again than Hillel should lose his temper. Okay, so why is that Hillel said it wasn't good for him to lose temper? Anyone have a thought on that?
Well, you always say it's idolatry.
Idolatry?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
To lose one's temper, to be angry.
It's like worshiping an idol because you're putting your anger before Hashem.
Oh.
So when you put your anger before Hashem, like depression, you're not putting your connection first. Is that
like depression? Like when you're depressed, you also basically.
when you're sad, depressed?
Yeah. So what you should do, stop staring at your navel, basically. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like
Staring at your navel?
Yeah,
well, that might make you depressed.
That's
Instead of looking above you, you're looking
and
below.
Go around and helping somebody else instead of just looking the winds breeze through your head.
And actually, if you're helping somebody else, it's a practical tool that you're not thinking of yourself.
Yeah.
So part of that has to do with the concept of hashgacha pratit, or everything happens for a reason. So if we're angry, somebody has done something, or in this case, some student has come, or, purported student come and tried to provoke him on purpose, Hillel was restraining himself because to lose one's temper is like not believing that whatever is coming your way is basically final. So, yeah. So essentially that's the kind of unpacking putting the rage before, God. It's kind of like putting the fact that you don't believe that everything that has come your way is of God. So if you do, then perhaps we would be less angry, right? Although it's a hard midah to work on. It's not the easiest. It's sometimes for some people, especially a difficult attribute.
But it is easier as you get older. For
Perhaps
me,
so.
at least.
Yes. In terms of noticing how life unfolds.
It's not worth the energy in half the time.
Yeah, I knew the theory of this since a long time, but somehow it was much harder to fight that when I was younger.
So another story?
The rabbis taught a heathen came before Shammai and asked, "How many Torahs do you have?" "Two," he replied, "the written Torah and the oral Torah." The man said, "I believe what you say about the written Torah, but not what you say about the oral Torah. Convert me on condition that you teach me only the written Torah." Shammai rebuked him and angrily sent him away.
Okay, so now we've just had this story about anger, right? And we find that Shammai is sort of breaching that.
Who Shammai normally doesn't get the winning argument generally in Talmud anyway.
True.
So it's like they set him up as a dichotomy of example. There are dance. He came to Hillel with the same request, and Hillel accepted him as a convert. The first day Hillel taught him Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. The next day he changed the order of the letters. "But that's not what you taught me yesterday," the man protested. Hillel replied, "Then you relied on me for the order of the alphabet. Rely on me also for the oral Torah." On another occasion, a heathen presented himself to Shammai, saying, "Convert me on condition that you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one leg." Shammai drove him away with the builder's measure he was holding. He came to Hillel with the same request, and Hillel accepted him as a convert. Hillel said to him, "Do not do to others what you would not like them to do to you. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn."
Okay, so we've seen very much, this is the quintessential case that we always talk about in terms of Shammai and Hillel. This is the famous discussion in Talmud about the very big differences between the two. Shammai is saying, I'm not going to teach you on your terms, and he drove him away. Hillel, on the other hand, accepted him, but then tried to sort of like provide him with the information that was necessary.
On another occasion, a heathen was walking past the house of study and overheard the scribe reading, "These are the vestments they are to make a breastpiece and ephod." "For whom are these?" he asked. They replied, "For the high priest." He thought to himself, "I shall convert so that they will appoint me high priest."
Okay, so here a convert is walking past a Beit Midrash and saying, "Wow, that sounds like such a great office. I want to hold that. I want to be a high priest," right? So he goes to Shammai.
He presented himself to Shammai, saying, "Convert me on the condition that you appoint me high priest." Shammai drove him away with the builder's measure he was holding. He came to Hillel with the same request. Hillel accepted him as a convert. Hillel said to him, "No one can be appointed as a leader unless he knows the strategies of leadership. Go and learn the strategies of leadership." The man went and studied Torah. When he reached the verse, "The outsider that encroaches shall be put to death," Numbers 151 JPS, he inquired, "To whom does this apply?" Hillel told him, "It applies even to David, king of Israel, since he was not a descendant of Aaron." The convert then reasoned, native-born Israelites are called children of the All-Present, and through his love for them he called them Israel. "My firstborn son, yet of them it is written, the outsider that encroaches shall be put to death." How much more so does the verse apply to me, a humble stranger who comes with a stick in his bag? He went to Shammai and said, I'm unfit to become high priest. Is it not written, the outsider that encroaches shall be put to death? Then he returned to Hillel and said, Patient Hillel, may blessings rest on your head, for you have brought me close beneath the wings of the Shekinah. Later the three converts met at an inn. They said Shammai's impetuosity would have driven us from the world, but Hillel's patience brought us close beneath the wings of the Shekinah.
Okay, so in these three examples, what do we see in terms of like teaching styles?
Well, Shammai didn't teach anyone, but he
Well,
did.
he did teach.
But he taught that his repulsion therapy drove them to where they could learn.
That would be one way to look at it.
I just, the teachers in certain schools are much stricter than others. When I was growing up, the teachers were like Shammai. There was no question. They would consider them incompetent if the teacher would act the way in the United States teachers act.
You know, it's very interesting. There's a book that's out, I think it's called Tiger Mother, and fascinating, provocative in terms of like
An Asian woman.
discussion about how a Chinese woman who, and just one of the anecdotes, her daughter was learning some very difficult technical violin piece, saying, stay up, you have, from now until you go to sleep tonight, you must learn this violin piece, right? So the girl tried and tried, and the mother said, you will learn this before you go to sleep tonight, period. She gave her no food, no water, no bathroom break, no dinner break, and no rest until she learned. And I think she was up to like midnight or something learning this, you know, piano piece. Or, I'm sorry, violin piece. So, and that's just one of the examples about how, and she was apparently interviewed on one of the local talk shows about how she was just, you know, kind of brutal. In her mind, she said, you know, this is what Chinese mothers do. We teach our children to rule the world. And how many Americans were having a fit about how that kind of, you know.
This is
teaching-
nonfiction. That's a
But this is
nonfiction account. That was a
nonfiction.
bestseller
I
too.
lived through that. That was the standard.
Actually, I think American style teaching is okay because there's a woman that I just met, and her son actually requested to get piano lessons, and I watched his little video, and he's probably 8 years old, and she's so proud of him. She says the house is so warm when he's playing, but he was effortless, and he chose to do it, and he has a teacher that's not driven, but he wants it, and so he goes to it. So I think it depends, because Shammai has a form of restriction, and Hillel has a form of acceptance, and those that come to Hillel study. So I don't think you have to have the iron fist.
Well, no, of course not, but there
This
has
little
to-
boy is
We're
playing
on
awesome.
page 107, and we're talking about Tiger Mother, the Chinese woman who, I don't know if you're familiar with the news story about it.
What came out this year, I think.
I don't think results in the education system come different in different ways now. The fact that there are not enough engineers in the United States is because
No
70%.
natural genius?
No, absolutely not, because they're lazy. Because the entire system is about praising you and telling you that's all you do is just fine.
This is exactly the argument from people from Europe to Asia about our learning system.
But that doesn't say that here.
I don't know that we can like make that leap of assumption. We don't know what methods, other than bringing the people in initially and saying, learn, go and learn. We don't know what methods Hillel used. I mean, there were probably very standard methods of what one had to memorize, what one had to know, all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of having the gate open or the gate closed, that's the only difference we see here between Hillel and Shammai.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know that his teaching methods were incredibly warm and fuzzy, nor do we know that he was, Tiger Mother. We don't know what Hillel did. All we know is he opened the gate and allowed the people in instead of pushing them away when they said, I want to. So, and this is probably, if we kind of get ourselves sort of into the mindset of where Hillel might have been coming from, and this person comes up and says, I want to be a high priest, convert me. Can you imagine Hillel's thoughts as he's saying, well, that's very, can you see like the little commentary running underneath the thoughts and he says, boy, that's really interesting. There's absolutely no way this person can manage to do that because they're not a descendant of Aaron. But yet, they're asking and they're wanting to learn. So
he sends them to study.
He sends them to study and he provides them a method of study. He's obviously not going to make them high priest either.
Right, because through his study, he finds where it says that he can't become the high priest.
He finally figures it out himself.
Right.
I mean, Shammai didn't even bother to tell him why.
Right.
Shammai just sent him away, saying, what you want is impossible. Shammai knew that and sent him away. Hillel knew that, but allowed him to come in and study anyway, even though he knew that what he's requested is beyond him.
But there is a midrash that Shammai and Hillel were arguing on one specific question, and a voice from the above came and said that
that's Talmud.
Of the
Elu ve'elu devavim.
Okay, both of them words of God. But in this particular case, Hillel is right. So, and the reason why Hillel is right is because before he came to his stated his conclusion, he listened carefully to what Shammai had to say. While Shammai came to his conclusion, not listening carefully what Hillel had to say. And
so the fact that the crux of the issue
is that
in terms of the listening piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to 107 here.
The italics.
Yeah. Monica, do you pick that up?
The Ten Commandments forbid people to work their animals on the Sabbath. Mishnah interprets this to mean that an animal might wear ornaments or protective clothing on the Sabbath. It should not be used to carry any form of burden. Rabbi Eliezer ben
Azariah,
thank you, allowed his cow to go out with a ribbon between her horns, contrary to the majority opinion that this constituted a burden. The Gemara concludes that it was his neighbor's cow, but that he was responsible since he ought to have informed her that she was doing wrong. This leads to a discussion of the extent to which we are responsible for our neighbor's actions and to general reflections on the connection between sin and punishment. Can there be suffering without sin? Can anyone be entirely free of sin?
Rabbi Ami said, there is no death without sin, no suffering without guilt. There is no death without sin, as it is written. The person that sins, he shall die. The son shall not bear the sin of his father, nor shall the father bear the sin of his son. And no suffering without guilt, as it is written, I will visit their sin with the rod and their guilt with plagues. Son. Objection was raised to Rabbi Ami's view. The ministering angel said to the Holy One, blessed be he, why did you impose punishment on Adam? He said to them, I gave him one simple commandment and he transgressed. He said to him, did not Moses and Aaron observe the whole Torah, yet still they died? He replied, all things come alike to all. One fate befalls the righteous and the wicked, the good, the pure, and the impure. Ecclesiastes. Rabbi Ami's opinion accords with that of the Tana, who taught. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, even Moses and Aaron died through their own sins, as it is said, for you did not trust me. Numbers. This implies if you had trusted me, your time would not yet have come to depart this world. They objected. 4 died through the counsel of the
serpent. So the footnote there, 21.
Yes, through the counsel of the serpent gave Eve, not through any other sin, for they did not sin themselves.
That's at least according to Rush.
Yeah, this view resembles the Christian doctrine of original sin as later formulated by Augustine. And they said the 4 that died through the counsel of serpent, and they are And these are the Benjamin, son of Jacob, Amram, father of Moses, Jesus, father of David, and Hillel, son of David. All Gemara, they have no biblical basis, but are traditional teachings. Okay. All are Gemara except for Jesus, father of David, to whom scripture leads. And Absalom had set Amasa in charge of the army in place of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man called Itra the Israelite, who had intercourse with Abigail, daughter of Nahash and sister of Joab's mother Zeruiah.
Okay, and so daughter of Nahash may have been the problem there.
Oh, Nahash, just because Nahash is snake.
Right.
It is,
So,
doesn't even say here.
so I think it will tell
Okay.
us shortly, but yes.
But was Abigail really the daughter of Nahash, a snake? Surely she was the daughter of Jesus.
Jesse, or Yishai.
Yishai, okay. David ben Yishai, okay, Yishai. Okay. As it is written in a list of Yishai's children, all their sisters were Zeruiah and Abigail bore Amasa. Chronicles. We must infer that Abigail was the daughter of the man who died through the counsel of the serpent.
Okay, so this is talking about, from tradition, we've got 4 that we know who died, quote, through the counsel of the serpent. And according at least to Rashi, this has to do with back hearkening to Chava or Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? So who raised this objection? It could not be the Tanakh who spoke about the ministering angels, for he would have included Moses and Aaron among those who did not die on account of their sin. So must it not be Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, from which we may conclude that there is death without sin and suffering without guilt? So this is the question. Can we find any example where there was death without sin or suffering without guilt? So
In Torah.
in Torah, yes.
Or Tanakh.
So go ahead and pick that up for me, guys.
Rabbi Amin, contrary opinion is therefore refuted. Pagan philosophers such as Solus and heretics such as Marcion and Faustus the Maccabi attack the Bible on the grounds that its attributes apparently evil deeds to God and to prominent figures whom we are encouraged to regard as virtuous. Plato had expressed similar criticism of the traditional Greek myths, but whereas he was ready to accuse Homer of error and to recommend that such stories not be taught to the young, the rabbis felt obligated to them to defend the Word of God as it stood. They achieved this, much as the Alexandrian scholars who had defended Homer, by radical reinterpretation of the text, filling gaps in the narrative so as to present their heroes in a more favorable light. Rabbi Yohan ben Elazar immigrated from Babylonia to Sepphoris, Galilee, early in the 3rd century and established a reputation for his polemics against heretics. His defenses of biblical heroes have been worked into a literary unit in which each portrait shares these features. Number 1, attributes to Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani in the name of Rabbi Yohan. The formula. Number 2, whoever says X sinned is mistaken. Number 3, a proof text demonstrating that X was not a sinner. Number 4, the text indicating X's apparent misdeed. Number 5, reinterpretation of the text, claiming though X sin was comparatively minor, Scripture counts it as if he had sinned greatly.
Okay, so you can see what the problem is do we have in our text a lot of discussion that God somehow commits evil? And if that's the case, what do we do about that? How do we deal with that? And this all hinges on this issue of, is there sin? Is there death without sin?
You know, we studied these in Tanakh class.
Yeah.
I just find it fascinating. Once Hebrews decided there is only, whatever, I think it's right, decided there is just one God. then everything, including evil, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Ra, inside of us, it's all belong to God. And this is very hard for people with other theologies to accept. And people come up with Trinity and with all sorts of other
Ways to get around
ways,
it. Yeah.
because it's very hard to accept that good God will do something. And also it's traditional Jewish, how do you call it, hermeneutics?
Hermeneutics, yes.
Right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
There these 13 rules.
Yeah.
We were like in the second class, I found them.
They're
couldn't
in the
just about
Siddur.
anything to prove that every one of these very faulty heroes are actually absolutely positive. And they just,
And so now we've got,
because they're supposed to be role models, but Genesis is not supposed to be role model.
so this is the question of theodicy, right? Is God all good, all powerful,
All knowing.
and are all knowing? So what's the response? How do you get out of this conundrum? How do you get out of this problem? So if you're going to say that God is not all good, that's a little painful. Can't fix it, even if God knows about it. These people argue about free will, and maybe because free will exists, God, therefore withdraws God's power. God maybe doesn't know about all of it. So this is the out that the Lubavitcher Rebbe uses, saying that it's all good, but we just can't see it. Yeah, it's our world that we can't see this up close and personal kind of thing. It's too hard for us to know in this world that it's all good or not all good. Okay, Diane, you want to pick it up there, Rabbi Shmuel?
Some say the universe is indifferent. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Jonathan, whoever says David sinned is mistaken, for it is said, and David prospered in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Is it possible that if the Shekinah were with him, he would be led to sin? In that case, what is meant by Nathan's condemnation? Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do evil in my sight? You smote Uriah the Hittite by the sword and took his wife to be your wife and slew him with the sword of the Ammonites. He did indeed intend to sin, but did not do so.
Okay, so we remember what this whole story is about. Somebody refresh my memory.
So
David, what happened?
He is good because he personally didn't slay Uriah?
Well, we haven't got to that yet. Let's look at remember what the story's about. What's the story
Yeah,
about?
he was
He
one.
wanted somebody else's wife.
Okay, he wanted somebody else's wife.
And sends the husband to war.
He sends the husband to war. He's walking along. He's not out to war with everybody else. And he's walking along the top of the palace. And she's apparently bathing on her roof. At least, whatever, some midrash, like reading between the lines there. And sees her and desires her, sends for her, sleeps with her, gets her pregnant. Then there's the problem. Brings the husband back, Uriah, back to sleep with her, but he's such a good soldier, he says, no, I can't sleep with my wife when all my, the men are out in the field, I can't do that. So as a result, David thinks, okay, what else am I going to do? Sends him off to war and then has him slain, puts him in the heat of the battle. Okay, all right, now that we know that, now we have to figure out in any of that, and Nathan is the one who comes to David and says, you've sinned, essentially, or allows David to sort of like unpack that information himself in the little story, the little metaphor about the sheep. There was a man who had a sheep. Right, okay. All right, so now we're trying to figure out how David is really a good guy and never sinned, because that's kind of what we need to know, or that he did sin and that's why he died. So that's the sort of push-pull we're trying to figure out here. So when Rav said,
Rabbi Judah the patriarch, who was descended from David, reinterpreted David's favor. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do evil? The evil is different from other evils in the Torah, for elsewhere it is written, and he did, but here it says merely to do. That is, he intended to sin, but did not, in fact, do so. You smote Uriah the Hittite by the sword. You ought to have had him tried independently by the Sanhedrin, but you failed to do so, and took his wife to be your wife. The taking was valid since, as Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Jonathan, whoever went to fight in the war of the house of David first wrote a conditional divorce for his wife, as it is said, and bring these 10 cheeses to the captain of 1,000, and to your brothers bring greetings, and take them aruba. What is the aruba? Rabbi Yosef taught. Matters involving him and her, bills of divorce.
Okay, so the footnote there on 27.
Aruba generally means pledge, but here it is obscure. The word is derived from a root meaning to mix or involve, hence Rav Yosef's interpretation.
Okay, so if he was really divorced,
There was no issue.
there wasn't perhaps an issue, right?
Arva is the woman that
Well, erva,
can. Arva, it's not the same word.
I think it may not be the same. Aruba. Yep, so aruba generally means pledge, so apparently there's at least a different meaning and maybe spelled differently. So, but I guess we
But
can look
maybe the
up 1 Samuel to look up for sure. And then, okay, so go ahead.
Pledge does not mean an actual divorce. Pledge means the intent.
You know, the issue, I mean, at least according to more current or at least Talmudic law, would be the get had to be drafted, but maybe it wasn't provided to her yet. So I assume that's what they're talking about, that the get was drafted, but it had not yet been delivered. So, go ahead.
And slew him with the sword of the Ammonites. Just as you are not held responsible for the sword of the Ammonites, so you will not be held responsible in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. What is the reason for that? Uriah was guilty of treason, hence liable to the death penalty, since he had rebelled against the king, for he said, My lord Job and my lord's servants are encamped on the open field, thereby declaring his allegiance to Joab rather than to David. Do you pronounce it Joab?
Or Yoav. So, at any rate, so their argument here is that David was righteous in having this guy killed because apparently he was guilty of treason anyway.
Because he didn't do what David told him to do.
Well, no, because his statement that is put in his mouth said, "My Lord Joab," right? So if that's the case, then he is declaring allegiance to
Someone else.
someone else, right? So this is their argument. So I mean, they're very closely reading Tanakh and putting, these comments into Uriah's mouth to find him guilty of treason. Therefore, David becomes the good guy, right?
Overlooking the part that Uriah's wife had been with David prior to any of this transaction.
So Rav said,
Rav said, when you look into the affairs of David, you find nothing amiss except in the matter of Uriah, as it is written, David did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and departed from what he commanded him, only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite.
okay, so looking at Torah, Rav is saying everything David did was good. Everything was fine. So the whole thing with Bathsheba, not a problem, right? Because of what it says. So he's taking that to have a bigger global meaning than what we likely think that it's, probably related to something more specific to the text, in context. Okay. Judy, you want to pick up Abaya, the elder?
Abaya, the elder, noted a contradiction in the words of Rav. Could Rav have said that? Did not Rav himself say that David sinned since he accepted slander against Mephibosheth? This is a good question. On that point, Rav said, David accepted slander as it is written. And the king had said to him, Where is he? And Ziba said to the king, He is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lo-debar. And then it is written, Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lo-debar. Now David had already seen that Ziba alive, so when Ziba again slandered Mephibosheth, why did David listen? For it says, and the king said, Where is your master's son? And Ziba said to the king, He is in Jerusalem, for he says, Today the house of Israel will restore my father's kingdom to me. And king said to Ziba, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours. And Ziba said, I prostrate myself. May I find favor in your eyes, Lord King.
Okay, so, there's issues about who was going to be king, and Mephibosheth was lame. So there was some issue about him not being able
Bless
to
you.
accept it.
That was a sneeze.
So go ahead, but Shmuel says,
Shmuel says David did not accept slander. David received indications of Mephibosheth's treachery, and it is written in
Mephibosheth,
Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. He had not dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes. And the king said to him, why did you not come with me? Mephibosheth. And he said, my lord king, my servant deceived me, for he said, I will saddle an ass to ride upon and go to the king, for your servant is lame. And he slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like an angel of God. So do whatever seems good to you. And the king said to him, why speak any more of these matters? I say you and Ziba should share the field. And Mephibosheth said to the king, let him take it all, seeing that my lord the king has come in peace to his own house. What Mephibosheth meant was, I said, when will you come in peace, and are you doing this to me? And you are doing this to me. My quarrel is not with you, but with the one who brought you back in peace. This is the meaning of and Jonathan's son was
Merib-Baal.
Chronicles. Was his name Merib-Baal? Surely it was
Mephibosheth.
Mephibosheth. I had a list on that.
You did.
But when he stirred up a quarrel with his master, a heavenly voice declared it of him, strife, son of strife, strife, as we have said, son of strife, grandson of Saul, of whom it is written. And Saul arrived in the city of Amalek and strove in the valley.
Okay, let's pick up all of
footnote.
these footnotes here.
Quarrel with his master is a loose interpretation of the Hebrew word Merib and Baal.
Right, so that's why they're getting it. It's an actual, even though in a lot of the place names, it's actually significant what the place name is, because there's connotations. I mean, in a literary technique, it's fascinating how those names become important. So, all right, so, and then 30 is?
He rebelled against the house of David. The unusual translation is lay in wait in the valley, but the Hebrew for lay in wait is a normal word for strove or quarrel. Rabbi Mani held that Saul objected to the command to exterminate the Amalekites.
Okay, so they're sort of finding a connection between the two of those. All right, Rabbi Mani says.
Rabbi Mani says Saul strove concerning that which was to take place in the valley. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, when David said to Mephibosheth, you and Ziba should share the field, a voice from heaven proclaimed. Rehoboam and Jeroboam will divide the kingdom. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, if David had rejected Ziba's slander, the kingdom of the house of David would never have been divided. Israel would not have served idols, and we would not have been exiled from our land. Mishnah lists the 39.
Okay, so let's stop there. Well, we're going to pick that up next week. So we'll start with the 39 blachot. Okay, all interesting details of life. Thank you all for coming today.